Rich Dad's Prophecy was published in 2002, and if I had known how bad it would be at this time, I don't know what I would have said. It's much worse than I thought it would be. This show is about what are you going to do if Rich Dad's prophecy is right? What happens if we do go into a global economic collapse? What happens if we go to hyperinflation? What happens if we just go to no economy? What happens if you lose your job? What happens if your whole stock portfolio tanks and you can't retire? What happens? So we're going to play worst case scenario so that you have an idea how to prepare for 2016 and beyond. So any comments there, Kim?
Yeah, well, I'm excited about it because this is part of a series of what's coming in the future, what's coming down the road for 2016. What do our experts here expect to see happening? And most importantly, we're going to talk, very bluntly and upfront about what we see coming, so that not to scare you and not to have you tuck your head in the sand, but so that you can be better prepared and you can take action today and be active about whatever's going to happen, whether it goes up, down, or sideways.
So again, this is the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're getting ready for 2016, and if I am correct, if Rich Dad's prophecy is correct, and the Rich Dad's prophecy was based on the 401k. He said it was the biggest ripoff he had ever seen. It's not about protecting the investor. It was to suck fees out of the whole system. That you get the fee for this, a fee for that. And the poor baby boomers, there's 75 million. Many of them don't have any savings. Many of them, all they have is that 401k. And many of them really don't know what's going to happen. And if Rich Dad's prophecy comes true and millions lose their jobs, and what happens when millions lose their retirement? And what happens when they find out their savings are worth nothing if we go to helicopter money or hyperinflation? That's what this program's about. So stay tuned and listen, because you're going to hear some interesting thoughts. We're not going to be politically correct. We're going to be like our friend Donald Trump, who's definitely not politically correct today. But anyway. And
what we don't want is, what you're saying is, people don't know what to do. And so they get paralyzed. And that's not what we want. That's not the purpose of this program. This purpose of this program is to give you choices and options and let you see what might be coming, so that you can take care of you and your family.
Right. The whole point of Rich Dad, the company, is that everything's changed. In 1971, when Nixon took us off the gold standard, we could print money. That changed the world. So today there's been this get-rich-quick mentality. Everybody's getting rich. There was subprime mortgages. People were speculating on houses, the stock market, and all that. I think that sleigh ride is over, and I think that's what we're talking about today. So our guest today, our Rich Dad advisor, is Ken McElroy, who is our real estate guy. He was a founder of MC Companies. He's the author of ABCs of Real Estate Investing. Also, Tom Wheelwright, Rich Dad advisor on taxes. He is the founder and CEO of ProVision, the premier strategic CPA firm. He's author of Tax-Free Wealth, Rich Dad Advisor book. And also Shane Caniglia, who is Rich Dad's president. He's also running multiple companies at the same time, same as most of us. We have multiple companies because we're entrepreneurs. So we're going to give you our view on the coming world in 2016. So the first subject here is this, and Shane has to leave right after this because he's catching a plane back to his other company. But anyway, I was driving in for this interview, for this radio show, and they were talking about, if you're 50 years old, go back to school and you can get this and you can do that. I said, I am much older than 50. I would hate to going back to school today. And the next question would be, if I was 50 and I was going back to school, what would I study and who would hire me? So since everybody in this room today hires and fires people, we're going to talk about what kind of person you're looking for. I mean, I know Shane would definitely not hire me as his technology genius.
I don't think Shane would hire you, period.
That would be true, and it's now recorded on the radio show. That would be true.
And, Kenny's unemployable, and Tom has a future because he's a CPA, he's a professional. But the rest of us have nothing going for us, right? I mean, Kim has been fired so many times, she doesn't know what a job looks like anymore.
Hey.
So, Shane, right now in the IT world and all that, if let's say I get fired, let's say you fire me from my own company, Rich Dad, like Jobs did, What college would you recommend I go to, and what should I study?
Oh my goodness! I'd say
If you're
that's
talking-
a trick question. I think.
An all-girls college.
Yeah, an all-girls college. There you go.
There's no hope, right?
There is no. Actually, to be honest with you, I couldn't recommend one. I couldn't tell you what to do. You'd be so
Far behind the ball.
You'd be so outdated that it'd be almost impossible to catch up.
Yeah, so when that guy was there advertising some college curriculum and all this stuff for 50-year-olds and all this, I'm going,
I can't even imagine that.
right now, people have left through just attrition.
Yep.
You haven't had to replace them, have you?
No, we are doing more with less by far. Our payroll's down about 30-some% from last year, and we're actually increasing all of the numbers, our revenue.
Yeah, so our revenue is up, expenses are down, payroll is down, and we're doing more with less because we don't need that many people.
And and if you were going to hire somebody, what's important? What do you look at? Do you look at a diploma? Do you look at their college, their education? What do you look at? What's important?
Nope, I have zero interest in their education. I couldn't tell you the last time I looked at someone's resume that I even got that far. The first thing I'm going to look for is, that there's standard things of how long they were at their previous jobs, right? But also I'm looking at what kind of things did they accomplish and what kind of things did they fail at, right? So you're really combining the look at a resume as well as interviewing somebody at the same time. But technology is unlike most jobs, where people, when they send you a resume, they should be able to say, hey, I developed this. This is my website. This is my software. I worked on this tool. You can actually go look and research that stuff and verify that they did it, number one. Number two, it's pretty easy to study the workflow. How easy is it for someone to get around and understand the software from a user perspective?
Well, so you can inspect their work.
Exactly. They can't hide from it because it's out there.
So let me ask you this, because you also hire non-tech people. What are you looking for in non-tech people?
You're looking... Be honest with you, again, we have zero interest in college education. You're looking for personality traits. Do they understand the word teamwork? How do they answer certain questions?
You actually have the team interview them as well, right?
Yes.
They interact with the team. How do they fit? Is it a fit?
Yep, they have to. First of all, we all need to collectively agree because we have a really, I may be biased, but we have an amazing culture at Rich Dad right now. The team's really strong. They understand the concept of more with less, but most importantly, they understand how important communication and teamwork is. When you bring in a new body and a new human, that can be, the age-old rule of one bad apple can spoil the tree. So the reason the team has to interview them is to make sure as a person they can fit in, because I can teach them whatever skill set's necessary. The skill set is irrelevant to me. We can teach you anything, whether it be a programming certificate where you have to go to school, any software to learn any admin skills. That stuff's all very, very teachable. It's the person that's got to mold in. And a lot of people are so stuck in their skill and their college degree and their education, they will not bend from that. They don't get the concept.
So Kenny McElroy is our real estate guy in all this. How many employees do you have in your company, MC Companies?
We're right around 350 right now.
Are you looking for people right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking for good people. We're growing, and it's very, very similar to what Shane said. Obviously, we're not looking for tech people, but personality and attitude are everything, and we can teach experience.
So if somebody, because the future of 2016, there's a lot of talk of job loss and layoffs and technology replacing people. So if somebody today lost their job and needed to go get another job or needed to go do something else, what would you recommend?
So I had this conversation just the other day with somebody. They're
Before
going
you
through.
fired them?
No, it wasn't with my company, but their company was going through a merger. And I asked one question. I said, "Are you making your company money?" And the person said, Yeah. I made X in sales." And I said, "Well, okay, then you're good." And it was revolutionary to them. So I don't think a lot of times people understand why they're there. I don't think they really get the bigger picture. If somebody's making you money, and they're doing things that creates revenue for the organization, you're going to be safe.
So
but that's not always true. If the merger is some other person comes in, they just get rid of people.
Not necessarily always true,
always
but mergers are rare. I mean, they do happen.
But I talked to a woman. She was applying for a job at another company, and she said, "Oh," I said, "What are you looking for?" She goes, "Oh, I want a job with no problems." I said, "Well, then why are you necessary? Who needs you?"
I've heard people say that many times. I want a job where I don't have to work with people. Okay.
Of 10 applicants, how many do you consider?
Probably one. That's me probably being generous. I'll be honest with you, some will come in with the whole benefit entitlement. I want nothing to do with that. That's all they go to. What kind of insurance do you provide? You guys do a 401k in retirement? Like, wait a minute now.
What's
really
in it for me?
The horse.
The questions they lead with are
tell you
very,
a lot.
very important.
That's a better way of saying it. I agree with you 100%.
And when you guys talk about personality, Shane, you talk about personalities. What's the personality you're looking for? Is there a common personality or?
Well, it goes a lot to what Kenny just said. The way you interact with them and the way they answer questions is very telling of how they're going to work within a team. There's many different ways you can interview people, but at the end of the day, the more you do it and the more they respond by answer to certain questions, it's not really a trait. You just start crossing stuff off. I've seen this before. I've seen this before. I've seen this before. I already know. And some people interview amazing. Like they are given the God-given gift if they can get a job at any time. And as a general rule, when I experience that person, my response is usually, I hope what you're telling me is the truth. Otherwise, we're going to be back here in 90 days and the conversation is not going to be very long because you won't be here anymore. So you have to always cross that bridge. Some people just interview very well. They're gifted with that.
So once again, I want to commend Shane, because our revenue is up, expenses down, employees are down, and we're making a lot more profit. And really that is the object of a company anyway. It's called profitability, kind of an amazing word. I was just in Singapore, and Lee Kuan Yew was the founder of Singapore. And he says, we run this government to make a profit. And I was going, God, what an amazing thought. Yeah.
You know what's funny about that too is I've always felt if I have to tell you as an employee or a team that we're here to make money, there's a whole nother problem.
Right.
You're so far off base in terms of where reality is. That's a given.
And I think a lot of college grads don't really have that in their mind.
No, that's what I'm saying. And it really
shocks you.
And when you're going through the interview process and you're looking for personality traits, and to your point, they start asking more about them. And it becomes basically as if
what's
you're
in it for me.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're lucky to have them. Like, wait a minute.
And Shane, with our team, you have really had to change their mindset about revenue generation, right? Mm-hmm. You've really changed your mindset to start thinking about what will generate revenue for this company, which is quite novel.
Yeah, and it takes years to break that down because employees think like employees. They think, give me a job, I want my paycheck, I want my benefits. Your paycheck only comes from making money. Right. If you're not making money, to your point earlier, I don't need you. You're replaceable as the guy next door. It's the way it works.
So thank you, Shane. Shane's back on the plane to Las Vegas, where he's got a bunch of other companies he's got to go and check in on the employees. And I really feel privileged and blessed that you're part of the Rich Dad company.
Yeah, I love it here.
Yeah, thank you. It fits our entrepreneurial spirit, doesn't it?
I love our brand. I love everything we teach, and I live it. So to me, I love teaching it. Yep.
Yeah, we're entrepreneurs. Because what we're talking about is 2016 and what we think is going to happen. As I said, in 2002, I published Rich Dad's Prophecy, and I said the biggest stock market crash would come in 2016. I also said there will be a preliminary crash coming prior to 2016. That came in 2007. And Kenny, Tom, Kim, and I, the people in this room right now, we made fortunes. The question today is, and Kenny, Tom, Kim, and I talked about it, we talk about it all the time, will the next crash be like the last crash? And that's why we started today with jobs, because millions of people will lose their jobs. And that is unfortunate. You may be the hardest worker of all, but let's see, the corporate shuffle, your card doesn't get drawn. That happens all the time. So we have Tom Wheelwright, and he is also an entrepreneur. He's a CPA. And he's going to talk about what he looks for. If somebody was afraid of losing their job, what kind of person would you be looking for right now, Tom?
It's interesting. What we look for is very much similar to what Shane looks for, in that we're looking for somebody who fits our culture. And for us, we're
professionals.
We're professionals, and we're very technical, and we expect people to be able to talk our language and to do the research and to actually do the work. And we want somebody just like Shane. If I have somebody come in and starts asking about benefits and how about your 401k plan, we're done. I mean, I'm not interested. I don't care how good your education is. It's not good enough to overcome the fact that it's all about you. So we're the same way. If it's about what questions they're asking is really keys into, are you somebody that we're interested in? Because we can teach you, we can teach you tax. If you've got a good, solid, basic education, we can teach you the tax side.
But most of you are employees are college graduates, right?
They are. They're all college
Well, they pretty
graduates.
much have to be
They have
in
to
your
be.
world.
That's
yeah.
the difference. So would you recommend a 50-year-old go back to get their accounting degree?
Well, you know, I was thinking about that, and it's probably the one area where you probably could, because you've got some maturity. The challenge is that we do so much with technology that you'd have such a tough time learning the technology. So I think the technology has evolved so far, even in the accounting world, that it would be tough to learn that side of it. You could learn the tax side of it, you could learn the professional side, but learning the technology side, I think would be challenging.
Okay. And how many employees you have?
We have 35.
And I love the question you brought up, Ken, about did you make money for this company? I mean, that's such a different mindset to what an employee thinks.
It is.
How much money did you make for the company? That's a great question. How much revenue did you bring in? Great question.
Well, because employees right now, it's all about how much am I going to get paid? I mean, we've had a couple of people leave lately because somebody hired them at a higher pay. I'm going, if that's why you're leaving, you should go.
Right. So anyway, we have Ken McElroy, he's a Rich Dad advisor on real estate. He is our partner in many, many real estate deals. We have made literally millions together, tax-free. Tom has made sure it's tax-free. And how many years have we been working together? Like 10, 12 years?
Well, it seems like 50.
Love you too, Kenny.
Just kidding.
So Kenny, what? Okay, we're talking 20.
I don't know why we have you on the
I've been wondering that for years.
About 20 years we've been working together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been great.
So Kenny, 2016 is here. What's happening in the world of real estate?
Well, we're in a very exciting time because the interest rates are so low and they continue to be low. So, that's the big question mark, obviously, for next year.
But even if they raise them, they're not going to raise them that much, right?
Not that much, no. So we have that issue. We have water. Water's come up, scarcity because of the population growth, and it's.
How does that affect real estate?
Well, it affects real estate a lot because you have to have water to build and you have to have water to grow. So that's a big one. Affordability is actually.
So let me ask: Would California be off your just for water alone? I know the tax purpose we can talk to Tom about, but
let's put it this way: when water dictates non-growth, then the whatever's there will go up in value because
existing properties.
Yes.
But also for the first time, we were talking about it yesterday with Tom and Kim. We were in a meeting. For the first time, we almost never sell. And for the first time, we're considering selling. Why is that?
Every market is a little bit different. And so, of course, we're heavily in the multifamily market, apartments primarily. And what's happening is the same thing that always happens, is that the hot money, the Wall Street money, the pension money, all that money is coming into the market really
They're
heavily.
chasing multifamily.
They're chasing apartments.
And this is this interesting thing. In 2007, when it crashed, nobody was in our marketplace, was it?
No. I wish I would have bought a lot more. And so, so what's happening is, when there's a lot of money chasing anything, the price goes up. And so the prices are way up, and it doesn't look like it's going to be slowing down anytime soon. We're trying to buy. We've looked at over 600 deals this year. And, we are it's not untypical to have 15 to 30 offers on one project, and
and you're one of the 15 or 30.
Yes, and very qualified buyers.
So you're thinking this may continue, all of this money chasing apartments, and
I do think it will. It's at the beginning of the institutional money.
So
coming.
here's the question that the three of us are looking at, Robert and myself and Kenny, is if we sell. Then where do we put the money? Where do we invest in?
But this is the first time I'm considering selling because I expect Armageddon to hit us.
Yeah, I think
money will dry up real fast.
Yeah, the question is that can these prices be sustained? Will they go back down?
I mean, they're paying ridiculous amounts right now.
They're paying.
And they're asking a lot for rents too in this area right now.
Yeah.
Just in our
affordability is the next issue that's definitely going to be hitting us next year.
So a lot of times people come in when the market's hot, but this time it's so hot we're actually thinking about getting out. What do you think about that, Tom?
There's always a time to sell and there's always a time to buy, and you always see the smart money comes in when
the stupid money comes in.
Smart money comes in when prices are low. Stupid money comes in when prices are high.
Remember when it was Ken Ken, Kim, and I in 2005 and 2006 when we were losing people because the subprime guys were taking them and putting them into houses they couldn't afford.
Well,
They
I
couldn't
remember,
qualify, yeah.
we of course run credit background checks on everybody that moves into our apartments, and we were denying them to be able to pay $700 or $800 a month, and then
Rent.
they were going and getting a home.
Yep.
So they were actually being approved to buy homes at the same time we were denying them as a rental of an apartment because of their credit.
But this is the funny part: is prior to 2007, residential real estate was the hot product.
Right.
And today it's multifamily, which is basically apartment houses, which is Kenny's specialty. And so we teamed up with Kenny, and we just rolled into multifamily or apartment houses right after 2007, and we made a fortune there. It was wonderful because nobody was in there, but now everybody's in there. So yesterday we talked to Tom and said, because we have tax consequences, right, Tom?
Right. No, for sure.
Well, we have to look at whether we're going to sell on these, but I think we should consider it just because of how high the prices are. And, you want to, I think in some token, you want to have some cash and wait for the next downturn.
So once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're talking to Ken McElroy, Rich Dad Advisor on real estate. He's the founder of MC Companies. His website is mccompanies.com. Also, Tom Wheelwright. He is the founder and CEO of ProVision, a premier strategic CPA firm. He's a Rich Dad Advisor. His book is Tax-Free Wealth. His website is provisionwealth.com. I am very pessimistic right now. I think we're gonna go down, and if we're gonna go down, I want to be getting out before it goes down. Any comments, Kim?
Yeah, well, I wanted to just turn to Tom and ask, we're talking again about 2016, and there's a whole lot going on in your world of taxes and things. So are there one or two changes that people really need to be aware of that they may not be?
Actually, the big thing I think that'll happen in our world is the presidential election in 2016. And I don't know if you remember the last crash happened the last time a president turned over. When Bush turned over the presidency to Obama, and that was the last crash that we had. So
Not willingly.
not willingly, but he did. He did, and so there's a lot of discussion. I don't know if you watch any of the debates. There's a lot of discussion of what happens in the tax law. Republicans calling for abolishing the IRS, and the question is, why would you have such a big call for abolishing the IRS? Well, the reason is because the IRS, what we know is talk about culture, company culture. Well, you have corporate culture in the IRS too. And the corporate culture in the IRS right now is to hammer the taxpayer. They are looking not just for compliance, they're looking for money. And we're seeing it in the audits every time. It didn't used to be this way.
Is that because we now have a $20 trillion deficit?
It's actually, part of it's because the IRS is trying to justify its existence. I mean, it's actually, it's had budget cuts every single year for the past several years. And it's got pressure. So you're right. It's got pressure from Congress, collect more money. And in fact, Congress just in the transportation bill requires the IRS to use outside credit collection agencies in order to collect old tax debt.
That's going to be brutal.
That will be brutal.
Can you imagine them calling
can you imagine a contingent fee on a tax collection?
For all of you guys out there who owe some back taxes, they're coming after you.
Big time.
Oh, and
not only that, if you owe enough, if you owe $50,000 more, they'll take your passport. And
So
you can't.
So the IRS has become.
So you can't go to Syria and get.
They're absolutely.
They become the
The
So you can't go to
Gestapo.
yeah.
They've absolutely become the
Unbelievable.
Gestapo. On top of that, if you want to resolve your issue, your tax problem with the IRS, you can't even get a hold of them because they're only answering 40% of their calls.
And I think this is a season to reconsider all of your thoughts and ideas for 2016, because I did say in Rich Dad's Prophecy 2016 was going to be the biggest stock market crash in history. And when the book was published in 2002, if I knew it was going to be this bad, I would have said there's a possibility of what's called a collapse. And there are economic collapses. That's what happened to the German Weimar Republic, 1918, 1923, is when they were sweeping the floors with, German Reichsmark. Cash became trash. And there's a possibility of it for the first time, and that's why Ben Bernanke, our former, we call it Federal Reserve Chairman, he's famous for being Helicopter Ben. If it gets real bad, they're going to just drop money, and that's his threat. Now, if that happens, I hope it doesn't happen, everything is off. Everything has changed because this is a worldwide crisis. So today we're talking to, again, Tom Wheelwright, CPA, and Ken McElroy, who's our real estate magician here, and my sweetheart Kim, but what we're going to do for the future because everything is turning and changing. Any comments, Kim?
Well, at the break, Tom kind of went on a rampage about the IRS. So I think it's important we talk about this a little bit because you've got some real issues about the IRS.
Well, what's going on is, every company has a culture, even government companies. And the IRS has a culture. And what they have is they actually brought in an IRS commissioner who is a turnaround specialist. I mean, he was the one who they brought into Fannie Mae in order to turn Fannie Mae around. He's the one, and then they brought him into the IRS to turn the IRS around. Well, from his standpoint,
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, in case you don't know, they're the ones who brought us the subprime crisis.
Right.
And they're corrupt as they could be, so he's going to go into the IRS, which is corrupt as it can be.
Right, and his job is to clean it up. But remember, we've got huge budget cuts at the IRS. And he's got to somehow convince Congress to give him more money. And one of the things I think that happened with this transportation bill and the requirement that they offload the credit, the collection process is, well, that's not in the IRS budget anymore. Okay.
So they're going to privatize collection.
They're privatizing
and you
collection.
said the culture now is take as much money as you can from the
There's
American
no question.
taxpayers.
There's no question. Actually, the best time for the IRS from a culture standpoint was actually when George H.W. Bush said, I want a kinder, gentler IRS. And we actually did get that from a corporate culture standpoint. Now it's the complete opposite. Now it's the old IRS, which is we're out to collect as much as we can. We're not just trying to get you to comply, but we're going to make sure that we get money out of every audit.
And that's why your book, Tax-Free Wealth, highly recommended because it's like, what do people do? Now that they know this, what do people do? And you really need a good tax strategist at this time.
I think more than anything, I mean, I'm actually working, I'm just doing it as a favor, but I'm working with the guy, this guy makes $30,000 a year, and he's got the IRS all over him for back taxes. And I'm going, and he can't get through. Literally, he cannot get anybody to answer the phone at the IRS. I can because I've got a special number I can call. But even me, now, it used to take 5 minutes. It used to be a 5-minute call. Now it's an hour and a half. I'm on hold an hour and a half before I can get a hold of the IRS.
Goodness.
So all you guys out there with back taxes, they're coming after you. That's really kind of the message. That's why you better get smarter. Mm-hmm. So, Kenny, what do you think about all this? I mean, you look at it because how many units have you got now, properties?
Just about 10,000 units.
Good. That's quite a bit.
And in the last segment, you touched on one of the issues coming up with the whole real estate market is affordability. What do you mean by that?
Well, we've had an incredible run in the apartment world where year over year our rent growth, depending on the market, has been say 3 to 10%. And so that doesn't come without some pain, from the resident standpoint. You have to look at that issue, Something that 5 years ago was maybe an $800 rent might be well over $1,000 today. Well, the wage growth has not kept up to that.
Yeah.
So these people that are living in our properties, and all these properties are starting to feel the squeeze from a rent standpoint, and it's something to watch. It's something to be concerned about. There'll be some serious shifts, I think, as affordability is a big deal.
So all like around us right now, all these new apartments have gone up, and their rents, like a 2-bedroom, 1,000 square foot, is $2,000 a month.
$2,000, right? Now, when's the last time you heard of a $2,000 rent in Phoenix?
Yeah, that's high for Phoenix. Very high for Phoenix.
I'll give you another example. So I've got a friend whose son is in low-income housing. You can't make more than $24,000 a year to be in low-income housing. The rent's $650 a month. That's their portion of it.
Their portion.
That's their portion of it.
They have to come up with $650.
They have to come up with $650. Can you imagine
on
$24,000 a year coming up with $650 a month for rent?
And the average rent in San Francisco, the average is $3,000 a month. That's the average.
So you see real estate prices going up, you see wages not going up, and that's where that squeeze is going to happen.
So that's something to watch, because what will happen is employers will look to relocate. That's happened before. It's expensive to be in areas where your employees can't live.
So as a real estate investor, would you look at building today, or would you buy
Well,
B
we're
properties?
building quite a bit, actually. We have over 100 million under construction right now. But yes, they say there's a 5-year demand for renters right now, which is significant.
Wow.
Which is why.
So for the next 5 years, it would.
That's what they're saying. Yeah,
the
the home ownership's down to 63%. It was up to 69 when Bush and Obama started in office. So it's gone down 6%. That's a lot.
And what's happening to the younger generation? Because, for myself as a baby boomer, housing was affordable.
That's a great question. So what they're doing, it's very interesting. First of all, they're not really loyal to, like our parents were to a corporation or to an area. They're mobility is another big deal. So they're moving for jobs. Doesn't matter where. So the kids, they'll go anywhere.
So they'd rather rent than buy.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Because of the uncertainty. But they're going wherever they need to go for jobs.
Once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're talking about what do we expect for 2016. We first had Shane Caniglia talking about who he would not hire, and for those, what he looks for in a hire, and it's nothing to do with where he went to school. But also we have Tom Wheelwright, who's a CPA, and when they hire, they have to hire college graduates. But for Kenny and Kim and I, we don't really need college graduates. We need people who like to work, and they're good at what they do. Also, we're talking about tax law changes. If you owe back taxes, they're coming after you. They're going to send private guys after you. They're not government employees, which means government employees don't have to collect. They still get paid. But if a private collection agency comes after you, they don't get paid unless they collect. So they're going to get a little bit nastier. And then Kenny McElroy, who owns 10,000 units, plus he has a construction business, is building properties. Our concern is, where does it go next? How do we stay affordable in this market? We can't even find affordable products right now. For the very first time, you hear Kim and I saying maybe we should sell because people are offering ridiculous prices for our properties. The reason we don't just outright sell, because it would be pretty easy to sell right now, is we'd have tax consequences, right, Tom?
Oh yeah,
why would we have tax consequences?
Well, because
we haven't
tax,
paid some.
The tax benefit of real estate, of course, is the depreciation. And so, if you sell and you don't reinvest that money, now if you sold and reinvest, then obviously you have no tax consequence. But if you sell and you don't reinvest, then you're going to pay the taxes. All those savings that you've had over the past several years,
all the non-payment of tax.
Now you're going to pay it.
Yeah.
So, is there any good news for 2016 taxes?
Well, we actually have there's a bill we hope will come through, which is they call it the extenders bill. It's all these like 52 provisions that are tax benefits that historically they keep getting extended 1 year at a time. They think they're going to be extended 2 years this time. So it'll be extended for retroactive 2015, which is horrible policy, by the way, and then forward 2016. So that extenders bill, if it hasn't already passed,
and those are incentives, incentives,
right? Then those are incentives. So those are good.
So how do you learn about that?
That's it's not easy. I think that's where you have a tax advisor. I think your tax advisor you need to depend on.
They need to ask them what?
They need to ask what's going on with the extenders bill. That's what it's called. What's going on with the extenders bill? And then we need to look at what's going to happen in 2017. Actually, what's going to happen with a new president? I think that's a bigger deal.
So the other big deal for those of you who are not Americans, not inside the U.S. tax code, is that the really big news is that on December 1st of 2015, they let the Chinese yuan into what's called the SDR, the basket, special drawing rights. So China now, the yuan, or the renminbi, whatever they call it, is now up there with the dollar. Dollar, I think, is 40% of the SDR, and the yen, the euro, the pound sterling English, as well as yuan. Now, people will say, well, what is the big deal about that? Well, the yuan comes from a third world country, China. It is the biggest economy in the world, but most of the workers in China are third world. So that means those of you who are going back to school for a high-paying job, what that means is that your wages will come down. So I was just in Thailand and Hong Kong and Singapore and all this. What that means is now the Chinese yuan will be competing with your money. If that makes sense to you, it means lower wages are on the horizon. That's the thing for all the world to realize about the Chinese yuan. The second thing that happened on December 1st, 2015, was that the Federal Reserve Bank is no longer allowed to bail out, like it bailed out excessively in 2007. That's now been curtailed. The reason I'm concerned about 2016 is if there is a crash, if the Chinese are going to just flood the world with even cheaper products, what does that mean to your jobs? Every time we shop at Walmart, not only do we send money to China, but we also send jobs to China and Pakistan, India, Mexico, and the rest of the world. So the Chinese yuan being part of the basket of currencies is a major thing that I'm watching personally, because that means more and more jobs will leave America and whatever, Singapore, Hong Kong, and all that. That's what that means. Any comments there, Kim?
There's so many unknowns right now, and again, we just keep bringing things to the forefront and talking about what's happening in real estate and what's happening in taxes, just so you become more aware and so you can do something about it. I think one of the main things you need to do is you really do need a great tax strategist. I'm going to just recommend, again, Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright.
His book.
Yes. But I do have a question and I do, of course, recommend your books to Kenny. Actually, there's one on here that wasn't on the list, which is the ABCs of Property Management.
Which is the key to real estate.
Yeah, and if you are going to go to real estate, and let me just ask you, should somebody today, would you recommend they get started? Can still get started today in real estate?
Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, there's still very good real estate markets, and there will be for at least 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
The reason is because people have to have a place to live. Right. It's not the flippers that will necessarily profit.
Correct. Don't try to time it. That's the difference.
Yeah.
And best of all, if you really want to do real estate, it's really a good time to start. Be prepared for it now. That when it crashes, you can go in. Because when this baby crashes, there's going to be a lot of people, as Warren Buffett says, who have been swimming naked. It means they're overextended, they're over leveraged, they're not prepared for a crash that's coming.
They don't even know.
Yeah.
They don't even know.
Right.
And Tom, an interesting question, because you talk about the president. Okay, so we talk about the different types of people in business: employees, self-employed, business owners, investors. Does whoever gets elected, does everybody benefit from that? Depending on who gets elected, who helps the entrepreneur and the investor?
I mean, obviously, there's big differences between the different presidential candidates. I mean, if you want free money, you're going to vote for Bernie Sanders because that's what he wants to do. Is he wants
God,
everybody
I'm voting
to have,
for Bernie tonight.
Everybody, seriously, I mean, he's a
people
self-acknowledged socialist, so that's okay. I mean, if that's
people
what
that
you
want money from the government are going to
if you want money from the government, I actually think you should vote for Bernie Sanders. Okay, if you want somebody who is pro-business, obviously Donald Trump's the only candidate that's really an entrepreneur.
Businessman.
He's the only one. I mean, you can't call it. Carly Fiorina is not a business person. She just was an employee. Okay, and the rest are all politicians. Except for Carson, right? Ben Carson. He's a surgeon. So, it really does depend on what's your viewpoint. Are you looking as an entrepreneur? Are you looking as an employee? You want the government to take care of you. I think that's a big part of your choice.
The point I want to make here is this. If this market comes down, that last crash for Kenny, Kim, and I, and Tom, it was a great time. This time it might be a little bit different, but we're still going to be in the market on it. We don't know which way it might go. If they keep printing, it's going to be great. If they stop printing, it's still going to be great. But you have to know what you're going to do. And that's the big, because every strategy will be different.
Well, I actually think your point about getting ready for it is so important. I mean, that's what we're doing right now, is because we actually think that at some point, we got so many baby boomers owning CPA firms that we're going to have a buyer's market in CPA firms.
Who we're talking today are Tom Wheelwright, Rich Dad Advisor on Taxes, author of Tax-Free Wealth, and Ken McElroy, Rich Dad Real Estate Advisor, and my sweetheart, Kim. We're now in the favorite part of the program, which is Ask Robert, where you get to ask your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them for you. So, Melissa, what's the first question?
Our first question today comes from Sam in Bakersfield. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The question is this: how will China's slowing economy affect the world?
That is the best question of the day, because I just came back from Asia. And I was in Singapore, and the Chinese government is now after any of those Chinese guys, especially the bureaucrats, who move money out of China. It's called a clawback in many ways. They want to find out where you put the money. So that means in Singapore right now, the real estate market is being hit. Vancouver, Canada, many of those criminal Chinese bureaucrats moved their money into Vancouver. New York City, San Francisco, Singapore, Hong Kong, and right now property prices are crashing in Hong Kong. Just because the Chinese government, that's just real estate. They're going after those guys who took the money out, which is what Tom is saying. They're going after tax dodgers. Any comments here, Tom?
Well, the same thing's happened in the U.S., right? I mean, that's what we've seen in the last several years in the U.S., where the IRS is going after making you report what money you have offshore. I mean, I think this is happening all over the world. I don't think it's restricted to China, the U.S.
But China's going to sink the property markets.
But China,
won with the money.
There's so much Chinese ownership of real estate in every country. I think it's going to be.
What's happening in Hawaii,
difficult.
Kim, where our boat is?
Oh, well, this is amazing. They are building thousands of condos, this one area, thousands of condos, and most of them
in Honolulu.
In Honolulu. Great area, but number one, there's not enough infrastructure, I don't think, to support it. I mean, the traffic is going to be horrendous. A lot of these people, a lot of the buyers are Chinese, Korean. Chinese and Korea are probably the two biggest buyers. And the starting price, just to even get a chance to look at it, is like $600,000. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy money.
That's just to stand in line. They want $600,000.
They're building a separate city, basically.
They were selling $20 million condos without, just from the plans. Full cash would come in from China. So that means if there's a clawback, it's going to be exciting, right, Kenny?
What that means is that the people that sold those are going to be in trouble too.
Yeah. So China's going to affect everything. When the economy goes down in China, the world's economy goes down.
Well, we buy everything from there.
Right.
Everything.
I mean, almost everything.
And what about with their slowing economy and all the resources that were going into China to prop up all the infrastructure and all the materials? That's all the natural resources now are.
And I realized
slowing.
I didn't do such a good job on what the yuan becoming part of the international currency means. It's the first poor country that has an international currency, which means that prices have to come down because the labor prices will come down for everybody. So that's what Kim was talking about the last time, was about what's happening with McDonald's right now on the kiosks.
Oh, they're building kiosks to go in all the McDonald's internationally to replace employees because McDonald's is so concerned about the rising minimum wage.
And what's interesting is the wages have risen in China, and that's why it's moved to Malaysia, Vietnam, and
now Myanmar because it just opened.
Yeah, so that's been an interesting thing to watch. It's because everything used to be made in China, and now that's all moving.
Next question, Melissa.
Our next question is from John in Tucson, Arizona. Favorite book, Unfair Advantage. He says, let's assume with a crash that unemployment skyrockets. How do we protect our real estate assets when the jobs are no longer there to provide the renters?
That's a great question because, as Kenny taught Kim and I, real estate is only as good as there's
jobs.
And so we're kind of facing that right now in the oil patch.
Yeah,
right?
well, we're seeing it on our properties that we own in some of the Oklahoma area and certainly in Houston, where oil prices are down and
100,000 people were laid off.
Yeah, and it's definitely affected. It's definitely affected our occupancies, and it's definitely affected. It'll affect your rent growth. It'll affect your cash flow.
And the thing that's kind of interesting is I love Texas. It's a great state and all that. But when I talk to Texans, they say, well, the price of oil is not going to affect us.
Yeah. Well, they have smaller hats now.
This is the thing. The price of oil affects the rich because I know it affects Kim and I.
Sure.
That when the price of oil comes down, our royalty checks are not as big. And we count on those. A lot of people count on those royalty checks. So it's not going to just affect the worker. It's going to affect the rich people who depend upon those royalty checks, or like Russia, which depends upon $90 a barrel oil, and it's at $45 a barrel oil. That's going to bankrupt some of the Russians. You look at Venezuela, which is the biggest oil producer in the world, and they're bankrupt already. So that's why it's affecting everybody, and it affects real estate, but it affects retail. It affects food. It affects everything. So that's why this crash is so important.
So, Kenny, does it make sense to look at where the job growth is, in what industries that is, and technically, choose properties that are close to that?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I mean, we're following healthcare and tech. So, the growing.
That's why we did well in San Antonio, because it's healthcare and insurance.
That's exactly right. Yeah, healthcare, the aging population, the baby boomers. anything with medical, healthcare, and then of course tech is just booming like crazy. Oil has always been up and down,
Right.
always. So
It's a boom and
it's
bust.
no surprise to me.
Oil's going to affect the whole world. That's
Yeah.
one way or the other affects the whole world, and that's really what this. It's a big crash. It's a big crisis. When Russia was dependent upon $90 oil to break even, and now it's about $50, that's serious for their economy. Next question, Melissa.
And if you have a question, please go to Rich Dad Radio, Ask Robert, and submit your questions because we want to get to as many questions as possible.
Our next question comes from Jean Paul in Wisconsin. Favorite book, Cashflow Quadrant. Says, I'm in the process of purchasing my first investment property. I found a nice 4-unit apartment building near a campus and close to 2 hospitals that would bring in a positive monthly cash flow if I did not own or occupy the property. I would like to start living in one of the units, which would cost me $200 a month to make the mortgage payment, thus a negative cash flow. What are the advantages or disadvantages of this strategy of an owner-occupied property?
Well, first of all, you got to separate consumption versus investment. So I think it's a great property just from the sound of it, right?
Yeah, it sounds like a great location.
Why is it great? Why does it sound good?
Well, because it's near universities, and when
Hospitals.
and hospitals, yeah.
Well, and I look at the math and I'm going, so what you're saying is that you're occupying one unit for $200 a month. I'm going, tell me where you can get rent for $200 a month.
That's a
It
pretty
sounds like a
good
good deal to me.
Yeah. But he's got to separate consumption from investment, and that's the big thing. How would you talk to him about tax and entity
Well,
structure?
I would do that. I'd say, look, it's 4 units. It's 4 units. So 3 of the units you're going to rent when you're going to occupy. So think of it 1 as your home and 3 as rentals. And I'd treat it that way from a cash flow standpoint, treat it that way from a tax standpoint.
And I would get Kenny's book, especially the ABCs of property management, because that's really the key to make it work or not work, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, he's got a free place to live, and he's wondering why it doesn't cash flow. That's kind of funny to me, but
He's doing good.
it's not a bad question, but
and
it's no surprise.
You're thinking straight. That's the good thing. And this is what I want to say, okay? No matter if the economy crashes or collapses, there's still an economy. People will still be buying food. They'll still be driving cars. They'll still need a place to live. They'll buying clothes and shoes and all that. There's still an economy. It won't be the boom economy we got used to.